Welcome to another digital event. Today we're going to be, it's going to be a collaboration of Motion Lab and Disrupt Network, and we're going to try something new, which is bringing people together digitally. So if you have ever joined one of our previous events, especially in the blockchain space, that's where Disrupt does a lot of online events, like 2 to 3 a week now, then you know that it's always been like a sort of a one-way interaction and people could ask questions. Today, we're also going to have a short talk by Stefan from Kopernikus Automotive. But after that, you can ask questions. But after that, as the last point on the agenda, we will use the Zoom breakout rooms to bring you into small groups of 3 or 4 people. And that way, make sure that you as a participant can connect with everyone else being present here over topics around IoT and the mobility of the future. So I'm Jan from Disrupt, super excited to be here. And as the next point, I will hand over to Laura, who will present Motion Lab for those of you who don't know it yet.
So hi all together. Great to see you all here. Yeah, Motion Lab in general, for those who don't know it, is a hardware innovation hub and makerspace. So it combines Berlin's largest machinery for prototyping with our great community and with co-working. So in short, you could say it's a perfect place for people that have a hardware idea and who want to bring their hardware idea to life. So if you have any ideas, if you want to meet creative people or talk to some specialists, you can just come to Motion Lab, have a chat, have a look at the space. It's really impressive, but it's hard to describe. So it's better if you come and see it yourself.
I'd say, Stefan, let's get started.
Thank you all very much, and thanks for having me as a speaker this morning. What I'll try to do is share my slides here. Hope that will work. And it's a privilege and honor to be speaking to you today. So thank you very much for the invitation and good morning to everyone. You should see some slides here about the digital disruption and the automotive industry. Can you confirm you see it?
Yes, you can.
Perfect, thank you. So what I'd like to talk about briefly is the idea of digital disruption and how it affects the automotive industry. And part of my life, obviously, I've spent in Silicon Valley, which is a remarkable space given that it is so small. It's not much larger than any German city, actually, like Berlin. But the economic power resembles more Germany than Berlin. So it has this huge, enormous economic power. Also given by the fact that, you know, if you look at the top 10 wealthiest companies of the world, 8 of them are there, actually headquartered. And probably Tesla is a good example, being in that space now, being worth more than companies that are from the traditional industries like Volkswagen or Mercedes. Now they're valued higher. And one of the questions really is, why is there this difference between the enormous valuations we see in Silicon Valley and what we see here? And part of that is whenever I talk to people there, they talk to me about the future as being exponential. They actually look for exponential business plans. They look for exponential growth. And they do it so much because they believe in these unspoken laws like Moore's Law, Metcalfe's Law, and others of the tech industry, which basically tell that, you know, whenever you digitize something, it will go with Moore's Law. It will have the acceleration speed of Moore's Law. And so when I talk to people at the Google University called Singularity University, they use that slide here, which is a good way of looking at the world of product introduction from the digital space compared to the regular forward going non-digitized space. And there is at first, of course, this phase of disappointment. And then there is that point which they call the iPhone moment at Singularity University, which leads into a phase of chaos and amazement of the traditional industries. And my question today is, where are we with autonomous driving, with self-driving cars, and where will be that moment they call the iPhone moment in Silicon Valley? And obviously, we are digitizing in this industry the driver, not the automobile. I think that's one of the biggest misunderstandings we have here in Germany. We are digitizing the driver, and driving, interestingly enough, is one of the favorite exercises of human beings. It's how we spend a significant part of our life. It ranges among the top 10 activities people do. It is, we do it more than having sex. We do it more than eating. We actually sleep longer and we watch more TV. But driving in many civilizations of the world ranges in number 3 or number 4 or 5 of the top activities humans do. We actually drive more than have sports. So when we digitize driving, the act of driving itself, obviously we are disruptive to the world. We are digitizing taxi drivers, truck drivers, bus drivers, people that have their income from this exercise and this activity, but we also are changing the world fundamentally. And I think this is why Silicon Valley really became a hotbed of automotive innovation. If you see here, there's not only Tesla. Every European automaker has their folks in Silicon Valley today, and they have their research groups, either they're tier 1 suppliers or OEMs, so automotive companies themselves. And this probably is one of the reasons why, because the idea is that in places like China or Silicon Valley, you can actually digitize things better. And now, of course, autonomous driving is quickly becoming a reality. We see a deal of Uber buying 24,000 autonomous vehicles from Volvo. No one else in the world has bought 24,000 cars before. GM has voted to invest $80 billion, that is $1 billion, in the development of self-driving cars by taking over companies. And obviously Waymo was the first car that really drove without safety drivers with passengers in certain parts of Arizona. And of course, there's a big question here. Do we see the same game plan we have seen with Apple and with Google when they took over the mobile phone industry? Remember, that also was a European industry, European dominated. I was working at Siemens at that time, which made a lot of European phones. There was Ericsson in the Nordics and Nokia, the world market leader in phones. And suddenly the disruptive forces were unleashed to basically change that entire industry. And now, about 10 years later, after the advent of the iPhone, nothing is left of that industry. And so our question when we started Kopernikus really was, are we in the same game plan? Are we seeing Tesla resembling Apple? Are we seeing Google resembling Google, what they did before? You know, they seem to have the same game plans in a way. Tesla made a well-rounded, ready-made product, very easy to use for consumers, including a full vertical integration. While at Google, we see this idea of, you know, giving out basically the software to cars, being the driver of cars, developing the driver with companies like Fiat, Chrysler, where they bought 62,000 cars, and they teamed also up with Jaguar, buying, you know, 20,000 Jaguars. No one else has ever bought this amount of vehicles. And of course, the question was, are we looking at something that will be, you know, this Google-Samsung relation, or resembles the Google-Samsung relation when they started mobile phones? You can also look at the exponential growth in the first days of Google's activity called Waymo, of course. And you see, it looks pretty much like an exponential slope, and we'll come back to that. The European industry in 2005 was still on a very much non-exponential slope of ideas. We invented this great European view of the stages of automation, and that's the actual slide I couldn't translate because it is so beautiful in German. I couldn't translate something like System übernimmt Längs- und Querführung in einem spezifischen Anwendungsfall because it is so bureaucratic. It is actually really hard to get the gist of this in English. I think only Germans can you know, invent something like that. In the very same year, Google showed a self-driving vehicle without steering wheel. So by definition, this needed to be level 4 or 5 of the European scale of self-driving cars and self-driving activities, the SAE self-driving levels. Of course, Tesla also started to do other things, like ad-based business models in the car. Of course, ads on a big screen, like in a Tesla vehicle, can be destination-based. So actually, you go to the media market because you want to buy something, and Amazon will buy your drive and will advertise to you articles. And if Amazon does this right, you'll never reach the media market because you will actually have made your purchase decision before arriving there. And that is what makes ad-based business models so effective. And this is one of the things why the Americans, especially larger investment funds, really invested in companies like Uber and others that do robo-taxis, because the aspect of ad-based business models in the car in a captive environment gets to be very interesting in business plans in the future. Of course, Tesla is also a company that, by the way, eradicates large parts of the German industry by eradicating all these parts from the engine here, which all are moving parts like pistons, camshafts, and so on. And obviously, a Tesla engine, as you all know, probably needs about 10 to 20% of the parts and the mechanical engineering that a conventional gas burner needs. Tesla also started to do something they call shadow mode training of their AI. And this is quite interesting. As you may know, whenever you drive a Tesla vehicle, the autopilot function is engaged, always. So you can drive, of course, manually, but the autopilot will also drive. It will just not use the actuators of the vehicle. So in other words, you will always have a comparison between what you do as a human driver and what the autopilot actually would do as a trajectory and as a drive. Then it would be checked, or it is checked, if there is an accurate prediction of your driving behavior by the autopilot. And if it is not, if there's an inaccuracy, they actually upload all the pictures for unit testing, labeling, and actually human control if the autopilot in this very specific situation has reacted differently to the human and why. And basically what they do is they then train the entire neural network, do a software update to the vehicle, and within about 3 weeks, actually your vehicle where you did this driving will get a new neural network like any other Tesla vehicle, which is improved. Something that the traditional industry is dreaming about. The traditional car industry thinks, when I say software update, usually about, I don't know, the diesel scandal. So it's a very effective way of training the vehicle, but they really treat the vehicle as a smartphone. And if you look at the effectiveness of that and look back to the exponential curve, then you see that Waymo actually started on an exponential curve. They started with 1 million miles in 2015. 2016, they had 2 million miles. 2017, they had 4 million miles. 2018, they went to 8 million miles, which is quite an accomplishment. And this is real world driven miles, not simulated miles. While at the same time, by the simple trick of shadow mode, Tesla came to 1.6 billion miles driven and counting. So of course, AI-based driving is non-deterministic. So our belief when we started Kopernikus was that AI-based driving systems will be 10 times safer and more capable than rule-based systems, but that the traditional European car industries did not believe in non-deterministic systems because of roadworthiness requirements. Our thinking really is when AI-based driving takes over, it will be too late for European car makers. We started off converting vehicles. You probably have seen this car around Motion Lab, which has a lot of cameras and a big computer in the back, NVIDIA. We became part of the NVIDIA Inception program and did actually some self-driving exercises, but then we pivoted our company after getting, actually 3 pages in the auto build like this one here. We pivoted to be an automated valet parking company because we realized that the artificial intelligence will for years not be in European vehicles. And this is not for the reason of the sensors, laser scanners or cameras, but it is for the reason that the compute power on board of the vehicle is not strong enough. So what we actually do is we put the computer in the building now. We enable buildings, facilities to drive cars. This has a lot of advantages when you think about parking facilities or automotive production plants. One of the things I want to show you is a little bit of a video that shows you how in a Porsche facility, actually at a Porsche production plant, we are driving Porsche cars. So a worker of Porsche can click on his smartphone on the screen here, can summon the car will drive and do an autonomous drive throughout the facility. And we enable that not by onboard sensors, but actually by the sensors that are in the environment. So we use surveillance cameras, for instance, that are there already or that we mount. And these outside cameras will allow us to detect the vehicle where it is and give commands to the vehicle. And we are safely driving on the Porsche factory premises, which I think is quite interesting if you have a 500 horsepower vehicle, which is actually a remote controlled car, remotely controlled by an artificial intelligence. And it can go in and out of the factory premises. It can go for checking control. It can actually do parking maneuvers, all kinds of stuff. And it actually does not work on invisible rails. It is free to drive wherever it needs to drive. In this case, the car decided it needs an oil change, so it will drive right in and ask for the oil change. So we are looking at the perfect storm. Google, Uber, Tesla, they're taking over the car industry. There's even a web page that talks about the total collapse of the European auto industry, the German auto industry. And so far, unfortunately, this prediction has been quite right. It's called The Last Driver License Holder, Der letzte Führerschein Neuling, in both languages, English and German. It's available on the internet. And really, it looks like the last driver license holder is already born today. How long do we have time? This is New York City in the year 1900, and you see a lot of horse carriages. Of course, you see also one crazy person here, an innovator. Right in the middle there, a horse carriage without horses. Now in 1910, the world has shifted like this. The same stretch of road is totally full, occupied of automobiles. Of course, there's still one horse carriage on that picture, but it shows how quickly the shift can come, if it comes. You can see the horse carriage back here. And in that meantime, all these jobs have been lost, right? Horseshoe makers, horse growers, grain growers. Actually, the predictions about horse poo are quite interesting in 1900 and 1899 that were published in the New York Times. Truck drivers will stay home. Of course, companies like Starsky Robotics may not exist anymore, but others like Too Simple are filling the gap. So they make cars, they make trucks that are hauling goods without drivers already. A company like Roland Berger has released a study saying there will be, at the end of public transportation in cities because of robotaxis. This is really quite interesting. And this does not come from someone who actually proposes anything politically here. It is a plain analysis of how the world will change. They predict that robotaxis will replace public transportation. And of course, you can stay with the old times. If you like driving, you're like a horse rider in the future. You know, you can still use public roads. You can go wherever you want to with that, even without a license plate or backlight, but it's kind of dangerous and it's kind of blocking the other vehicles. And it's kind of something you do on Sundays on a special place rather than for regular transportation. Or did you ride a horse to work today? And of course, you can try to fight it, like the British did. Here, horse growers, horseshoe makers, they formed a union together with all the owners of horse carriages, and they made a law called the Red Flag Man Act. And it actually forced any automobile in the early days to hire a red flag man to walk in front of the automobile and shout out, "Danger, automobile approaching," just to slow down the automobile to walking speed, obviously officially for safety reasons. But this act didn't hold up long, and in my view, the British automobile industry actually really nearly ever recover or never recovered from that act. But this is my personal opinion. Thank you very much for your interest and a brief idea of how disruptive forces and digitalization change the automotive industry. These are my coordinates, and I'll be here for Q&A.